Spill screen. No. No, you're good. You're good.
On my screen, it killed this one. I should apparently.
Come with me.
Can I just do
1 sec.
Windows P and have it go to both?
No. So, yeah, are you projecting on the both, or are you just doing it the single?
Oh, apparently it did split monitors, but I can do it.
There you go. Now you're hot.
Hot, hot, hot. Next time, this would be good. It's okay.
Thinking about that being there last time.
No. I mean, but being able to display would be good. All right. Let's get started. So, welcome to Philly.net, home of fun labs and meetings. I'm going to talk a little bit about upcoming events, and then we'll get into the presentation. So right now we're organizing all our meetings for Meetup, very common to do for community these days. And we have quite a history here. If you go into our meetups, you'll see that we have 22,000 plus campers. And if you go back, we've done 66 meetings just on this website. And of course, we've been doing this stuff for well over 15 years. Our basic schedule right now is to do one lab and one monthly meeting each month. The best way to look is you go to the home page here on meetup.com, Philly-net, and you can see what we have scheduled. React Advanced is a lab. In 2 weeks, we have a monthly meeting where we just have presentations. You do not follow along with your laptops. And then, of course, in January and February, we already have 2 labs set. And yes, they're all sold out. I'm not quite sure what we're going to do with these numbers going forward. Because, again, tonight there were supposed to be 150 people. And a bunch of them canceled. But as I look out into the crowd, I see maybe 50 people total. So obviously a lot of people are signing up and then not coming to the meeting, which is awkward for us to buy refreshments and things, but hopefully that trend doesn't continue too much. I understand that since we're starting to broadcast these things live, there's obviously an inclination to, at the last minute, stay home and with your loved ones and put on your bunny slippers and tune into Mixer to see what we're doing, and that's okay. We'll get used to that. So for each of these, you can go in detail, and you can actually see what's happening in the actual event. And it actually shows you who's going. And then there's a bunch of comments. So you'll see in the bottom of the description for tonight, we put the link to the live stream. And Rich Ross, is that working? Excellent. Okay, so again, this is something new that we're working on. This was spearheaded by Chris Gomez, who's waving from the back. See him wave? See, everybody wave to Chris. Okay, so he and Rich are the ones that are working on the technology to do the streaming. It's actually very clever because we are using the Microsoft Mixer service, which was intended to broadcast people playing games. And if you think about it, to broadcast a game, you need pretty high quality streaming hardware and software. And basically, Chris is piggybacking off of that, and you're starting to see a bunch of user groups and things do this also. So what's been fascinating is Rich is working very hard, trying to figure out how to wire all this up into the new facilities here. And we have a question, sir. The event code. I could do that if I were...
Here we go.
Yeah, fro. Okay, so to get on the Wi-Fi, you pick MSFT guest, and then it's MS event 38 ZR. Case sensitive, please. and the Wi-Fi works pretty well up here in the new room. So anyways, so we're using this mixer technology to live stream, and if things work out, we're going to do this going forward for all our meetings. It's a fair amount of effort. Hopefully you get some value out of it. The best I can suggest, if you are at home watching this, please send some comments back on the mixer service so that Rich and Chris get an idea of how things are working. Also, during the event, you can ask questions by typing into Mixer, and Chris is monitoring that, and he'll let us know if there's an interesting question that comes up. So, now, other thing I wanted you to do, and let's all get our laptops working. Lee, are you logged into the Meetup site? Well, you're behind schedule. Okay, so everybody go into the Meetup site. This is supposed to be hands-on, right? You can prove that your browser is working. Okay, so here's what I wanted you to do. And again, this does not work if you're on a smartphone. This only works if you're in a desktop browser. On the left-hand side, Meetup has a thing called Our Calendar. Click on Our Calendar, and you will see a delightful, yet somewhat boring calendar that shows the meetings. That's useful. What you probably don't know is that I use that calendar to basically plan events for the balance of the year. So if you're in a discussion with your spouse or other loved one, and some dates come up, you go to this calendar and you'll be able to figure out if you have an excuse not to be there for a family event or whatever situation arises. So, for instance, in January, we're going to have our monthly meeting the fourth Thursday or fourth Wednesday, because there is some big event happening in this room the week prior. And as we go through here, you will see that February, standard, March is different because we're trying to bring back our Code Camp series. So we haven't done an official announcement. We haven't really asked for speakers or sponsors yet. That's going to happen in the next 2 to 3 weeks. But basically it's there. ooh, there's a sale. Wait a second. I got to go buy something. So.
It's not 8:15 and 8:30 as the thing shows. It's 8:30 a.m.
Well, that's silly that it says PM. I could edit those right now, but good point. Okay. So, I have these sort of scoped out all the way up until next September. So you'll at least know when the dates are. And as we figure out topics and stuff, we type them in here. We can put in the speakers. And then once we have the speakers confirmed, then we actually turn it into an event. And it shows up as something you can register for. So, see, you learned something useful so far. Lee, did you think that was particularly useful?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, we have one happy customer. Very good. All right. So, the other thing, and this is very important for your activity over the next hour, there's a thing called Pages. Click on Pages. And the way Meetup works, you get a default page that you can say like, hey, this is what Philly.net is. Pretty exciting. And then they give you other pages. And for some ridiculous reason, when you go to Pages, you don't see those pages in the drop-down. You have to actually go to the bottom of the pages to see the pages. And you'll see that I have a thing here called Future Events. That's another place where I sort of lay out the schedule. But there is a page for tonight's lab. So I'm going to try and run the lab. And this is going to be stuff that you have to type in. Now, what's a lot more fun than typing in?
Cut and paste.
Cut and paste.
Yes.
Yes, so tonight we are going to play cut and paste. And I didn't even make any stinking slides. I'm going to just talk about stuff. So, I have to go find my instructions for tonight. I know they're here. I also have them in my bag, so give me a second here. We've been struggling for the last 2 years trying to figure out the best way to show you and walk you through code examples. And we've tried things like, last month I had you try and cut and paste out of a PowerPoint deck. That didn't work so well. We've tried Visual Studio Code snippets. We had you just read labs in a TechNet article and just copy stuff. There's all different approaches. So I figured, why not have another approach? Exciting, huh? So here's what I want you to do. Let's go to, I'm going to take this and isolate this. So basically, I want you to keep this page open because we're going to use that as a source of cut and paste. And I want you to open a new browser tab. And yes, if you insist on using Internet Explorer, you're welcome. Okay, so there's a thing called codesandbox.io. And I discovered this, and this is a splendid way to test a lot of these new frameworks. What it does is it has an online editor and file management system, and you can use that to prototype or to test different ideas. So it sort of works like Visual Studio Code, opening up a browser so that you can have real-time edits and you can see the changes. So we're going to use this for the first hour, and I'm going to show you how routing works in React. Okay? As you're watching this, you're saying, gee, I want to learn Svelte. How many know what Svelte is? Apparently it's some cool framework. I don't even know. Okay, what I want you to do, we're not doing Vue. Whoops, that's next meeting. So what I want you to do, under Open React, we're going to explore examples. Okay, and This guy just started this darn thing 6 months ago. Look how many people have made samples already. 91,000 code samples.
How many of those?
Now, remember, if you're a contractor, it's perfectly legal to go here, copy the code, put it into your client's work, and get paid for it. Just something to think about. You would never do that, would you? Okay. Okay. So we're going to start with this one. It's a simple React router v4 tutorial. That might be at the top of my list because I recently searched for it. If it's not in the top of your list, try something like searching for React router v4 tutorial. And I want you to click on that and let me know if you get that loaded in your screen. So you're looking for React router v4 tutorial. Show of hands, how many have got that loaded? Excellent. Okay, so that was easy. So let's take inventory here. We have a file system on the left. And in there, you can see who the original author of this was. You can see how many times somebody has looked at it and liked it and all that nonsense. There's a folder here called components. I'm going to explain all the files in a minute. Okay, there's dependencies. And when you worked with React, as I showed you last month, you have to load React and you have to load React-DOM. That is the base set to do something in React. Since tonight we're going to do routing, routing is multiple components in a single page application that you can click between them. Routing is added as a dependency, so it actually you add React router-DOM and then it loads that into this environment live. Now the editor in the middle is a code editor. It's based on something called Monaco. Can someone tell me what other code editor uses Monaco as its base? Visual Studio Code, that is correct. So this is basically using a lot of the same technology that is used in Visual Studio Code. And on the right-hand side, you basically have a little embedded browser. Now let's look up at the top. See this little, isn't that cute? Ooh, ah, ooh, ah. Okay, so go up there and click on the one on the right. Aha, I can just look at the browser. What do you think the left one does? Just the code, ma'am. Or you can do the split view, okay? I'm sure you have all that figured out. Now, last thing I want you to do, and this is real important for me, is I want you to click on the little preferences, which they could call settings. It brings up a wonderful modal dialog, and it has a bunch of stuff here, and it's like code mirror, all that nonsense. Now, what I'm going to do to make your life easier is I'm going to bump my code size, so you can see a little bit better what's going on. And I may actually go up to 20 just so everybody sitting in the audience can see that. They have a built-in Prettier. Prettier is a tool that you add in. And Prettier, as you save your code, will automatically reformat it for you, which is nice. Has all the color coding. It does preview, and it does experiments. We don't have any experiments. Now, this is optional, but you could, if you have a GitHub account, sign in with your GitHub account. And wouldn't you know, I have one of those critters. So now I can actually link this, and I can take the work I do and see right there is my GitHub integration. But I can basically take what I build here and automatically throw it up to GitHub and use it as like a starter project. So it has some real nice tooling, but I want to use this to teach you what routing is in React. So let's go over to the browser and let's try routing. So it says sandbox.io / and that's the home page. Click on roster and you'll notice that the URL changes to /roster. The top menu stayed, but the view or the content placeholder or web part, whatever you're going to call it, that part changed. In React, technically that's a component. And let's also click on schedule. Okay? So what we're doing there is we're using 3 links, really boring A tag links, to switch between components. And it does all that without refreshing the browser. So that, in essence, is a single page application. It's that simple. Now, how do you code that in React? Well, we've already figured out we have to, on the left-hand side, we have to make sure that the dependency React Router DOM is included. Okay. Then we have to import browser router. And you can work on the split screen. I can't because of the size of the font. So I have to import browser router from React Router DOM. And what we're going to do is we're going to take browser router and wrap that around app. And if you remember from last month, app is going to be our starting point for our components. Okay, so by wrapping app in browser router, it is going to handle the changes to the URL, and it's going to handle the back button and things like that for you. Pretty simple. Now, let's go look at what app does. To find app, we need to, well, that's index.js. Let's go to index.html. Index.html just has this thing called root. That's it. It has one div called root. And pretty common in React to do this. We're just using an ID so that in index.js, we can get element by ID. And that is where React is going to render all of its stuff. And since index.html has one and only one div, it basically takes the entire screen or your entire browser area, makes that div into the React application. So we're all wired up, we're ready to go. But we don't know what app does. So app is going to be a component. So on the left-hand side, I want you to open the components folder, and you'll see there's a bunch of stuff. Let's go to app.js. Okay. Now, just a footnote. Last month when we showed you how to get into React, we actually made files that ended in .jsx. In this case, we're just doing .js, and for this sandbox, behind the scenes, I think it's using Babel to actually transpile everything. So just make the .js, everything will work fine. Okay, so what does app do? App decides to load 2 components. Can anyone tell me why header and main? Now, are header and main, are they HTML tags or are they React components? They're React components. How do we know, Lee? Wrong. How do we know? They're uppercase. Okay? Because they're capitalized, we learned last month that a React component must be capitalized. And that's how the simple system differentiates between a React component and standard HTML5. There is a header in HTML5. It's a standard element. If you do lowercase header, it's going to use HTML5. Uppercase header, it's doing a React component. So it's loading 2 components. Why do they have to be wrapped in a div? Exactly. So when you create a component in React, and in this case, we're using a short notation. I forget what I called this last month. But we're not defining a class. We're doing the short form here. A stateless component. Thank you, Chris. So that's a stateless component. It's a quick and dirty way. And a lot of React people do this. If they don't need a lot of fancy code in here, they just do it this way. It's less typing. And less typing always wins. Does anybody remember COBOL? That was the most typing. Well, that and Fortran. So, anyways. So, you have to wrap header and main in a div because anything that's returned in React can return one and only one element. Okay. So, what do you think header has in it? Let's go down and look. Click on header.js. Aha. So, header is going to import this thing called link. A link is a thing that comes out of React router-dom that knows how to make links that when you click them automatically change the component display. So that is a built-in React thing. We know that because it's uppercase. Okay, so obviously the to is going to designate what our URL structure looks like. And then the roster, schedule, and home, that's pretty simple. That is going to show us home, roster, schedule. That's pretty easy. Okay? Yes? I have no idea. He wants to know why import React does not have a braces around it. A brace would imply an object. And the bottom one does, and I don't know enough about ES6 to answer that. Do you? It's destructuring. That seems like a cool thing.
But basically, in the React router DOM, there's multiple things that can be exported. When you put in the braces, you're explicitly asking for that part of the module.
Oh, and that makes your code smaller and tidier. Excellent. Okay, that makes sense. So yes, he's being very specific. He only needed that one element, so that shakes your tree or something and makes it so that less things get into your code and makes your application smaller and faster. Good thing. All right, so everybody understand how to put the fancy links at the top. Does everyone agree they look horrible? So you like them? Ay, ay, ay. All right. So what was the other thing that was in the main page? Main. so main is a little trickier. And this is the other central piece to routing. We're going to use a switch statement. The switch statement comes from React. It's uppercase. And if you look at the top, it comes from the React router DOM library. Okay, so we're taking route and switch, bringing them in, and we're using switch to let us go to a different set of pages, and then route is going to tell us for a given match, for a given path, this is the component I want to load. You load the component by its name, its class name, and to use those, you must import them at the top of the screen. So we import home, roster, and schedule. We switch between them. And when we do that, it switches the views. Now, I'm going to show you one more use of routing, and then we're going to start building stuff. If I go to schedule, that's pretty straightforward. It's just some hard-coded HTML for now. Nothing to see here. If I go to roster, aha! So roster actually is a child router. So the main router is going to switch the components, and then within the roster, we're going to switch again based on whether or not we're looking at all the players or a single player. And it differentiates that by, again, importing switch and route, and then deciding, should I show the full roster or the player? You only show the player if the roster has a slash number next to it, but the player's a number. So, now you know how basically to set up routing. It's pretty simple. And I think that we should start editing. Now, you're going to edit your copy. I'm editing my copy. We're not going to write over top of each other. So the first thing I want to do, we're going to go to the home page. That's pretty boring, isn't it? But we don't even know who the tornadoes are, but we do know who the eagles are. And if you want to spell it I-G-G-L-E-S, you're welcome to do that. Now, if you're in split screen mode, you will notice, if you go back to home, that the changes appear as you type them. And just to prove that, I'll go over here and I'll make this eagles. Okay, and then I can go back and Control Z and make it eagles. Okay, so everybody's happy with that. Okay, now, just like in Visual Studio Code, you get a little white circle at the top. That means you have to save this. So go ahead and save it. And when you save it, actually, do you notice the messages over here? It actually makes a fork, in other words, your own personal copy of this, so it doesn't impact everybody else. And you get your own URL and stuff like that. Okay. So, does everybody feel as though they accomplished something with hands-on? Do you think you could actually type a different team name in here? Okay, good. Now, you know, I don't think we have enough pages. So I bet it would be useful to know how to add a page. And here's the steps. On the left-hand side, in Components, I want you to click on Components, and you'll see that there is a little thing that says New File. So click on New File. And we're going to call this Stadium.js. And we get an empty file. Okay, now we've already seen a really simple page called Home. So what I challenge you to do, go to Home, Control A, copy, and go back to Stadium and do a paste. And you tell me what things need to change in here. Hey, that's pretty complicated. So now we have a new component called Stadium. We don't like we don't want it to say the same thing that Home did, but we have a new component. It's not hard to make new components. The harder part is figuring out how to get them to appear in the routing. Is there like a mouse on the floor or something?
They got a
Well, stop kicking the power cable.
it's like there's no tolerance at all.
Okay. Sorry for that interruption. Okay, now, I would like to be able to get this to appear, and I would like to have it do something useful. So this is where you go back to the meetup page. We are actually on step 6. And I want you to copy the code from there and use it to replace the div. Now, I know this is annoying. Look what it does. It ruins the URL, so you're going to have to be extremely clever and go back over here. And I can't help this. This is just Meetup being weird. You're going to have to copy the link address and paste that back in where it belongs. See? So what that's going to do is that's going to jump over to ESPN, their CDN, and it's going to grab a picture of the stadium so we can display it. Got it? Now, go ahead and save that. Say that again? Yeah, it's number 6. See the number here? It's all the stuff under number 6. And we're going to be doing this throughout the evening, or throughout the next half hour. So I'll be yelling out the numbers, and you're going to be going over here and copying stuff. What do you mean you don't have permission? You highlight it and do a Control-C. You don't need permission to do that. Okay. I didn't know that. Apparently it is. Okay, I'm sorry. So yes, you have to log in to Meetup. Okay. Little details. All right. Now, so now that we have a new component, did we have to wrap this one in a div? No, because it only returns back a single element. This is perfectly legal. Okay, now we have to figure out how to add this into the routing. This is the important thing for you to learn. So what we want to do is we want to go to main.js. Okay. Now to add stadium in here, you do the following, and you can do this by typing, or you can do it by copy and paste. At the top, this is in number 7. You have to import stadium from .stadium, or from .stadium. Okay, so again, it would be just as easy for you to type that. It's up to you. And technically, we don't need a semicolon at the end of that. I don't care. Okay, so the next step is to add a route so that we can define that the route to the new component is available. So we're going to do that with the next line, and I will let you in on a little secret. The secret is that in Meetup, I can't type standard markup because it takes it as HTML. So I cheated, and you just replace the beginning left bracket with a less than sign, and now we've added stadium component stadium. Okay, now go ahead and save that. Now I want you to check and tell me if this broke your code. Well, if it did, then you have a typo. So go fix your typo. Okay. Now, it didn't break the code. However, can I actually go to that route stadium? How would I test that? Okay, there's a problem here. Let me go see if I can fix it. I don't, oh darn it, what did I click there? I don't think in Stadium that we need this line here. I'm not sure why that appeared. So I'm going to get rid of the style line in Stadium.js, and I'm going to go back to the browser, and notice it seems to have worked, but it comes up with the alternate tag, which means it wasn't able to load the image. Did anybody get it to load the image? Okay. Excuse me? Aha. Yet another problem caused by, another problem caused by putting the code in Meetup. Awful. Okay, so go back to Stadium.js, and all you have to do is remove that little mistake that Meetup put at the end. Get rid of the %22, save it, and now you can be overwhelmed and extra excited because you will actually see the Stadium. How many got the Stadium to show? Okay, we got half of the people that should get the Stadium to show. But keep trying, it may work for you. Now, it doesn't show in the menu, but what I wanted you to see is that by adding the route, it establishes the route as being legal, and you could type the route, you just can't click on anything to go to it. We'll do that next. Okay. So, where are these little titles at the top? They are in the header component. So if you could please, on the left-hand side, go down to header. And you will see that there are 3 links and we need a 4th one. Now, rather than, you can go over to Meetup and copy and paste this, but I'm going to challenge you to actually use your editing skills and actually type Stadium and Stadium. That's all we need to do. That adds the link. Now, we didn't have to import Stadium because this doesn't reference a component. It's just an A tag. And if we save this, look what happens with the prettify thing. It makes it all pretty. So I'm going to go up here and go look at the result, and you'll see that Stadium now works. So now I can click on Schedule, Stadium, Roster, and we are all properly routed. Any questions so far? Stadium.js, yes you may. So what I did there, the only thing I did is there was a little error at the end of JPG. I had to remove the %22. I'm sorry, but Meetup just is really annoying to me. And I got rid of the style line. And I do not know why I put the style line in there. It wasn't originally in there. So. Okay? So what's important to me is that you at least understand the concept. The concept is that you create a new component, you add it to the switch statement. You have to add a route definition, and then you can add a link definition to have it display in the header. And that's all it takes to add a new page. So we basically have mastered routing. Our job is done. But the boss says, not really happy with the look and feel of this. Can't show it to the business the way it is. You probably never heard that. So, I am going to teach you a little bit about CSS. How many of you are nervous? All right, so there's a couple ways you can add CSS. I'm going to show you 2 of them. Okay, so, and even if you didn't get the first part to work, you can do this part. So follow along. Go to Components on the left-hand side and make a new file. And that new file is going to be called app.css. And all we're going to do here is get rid of the old-fashioned Times Roman font. Okay? Now, in the old days, we would go to the index.html. We would insert a link to a site.css, and in there we would put a body tag. But since we're cool and we use routing and components, why don't we just do it the React way? And this is how you do it. I'm going to go over to Mr. Meetup. And by the way, the style stuff works okay coming out of Meetup. So we're on step 9. We're copying the body tag. And we're going to paste that into here and save it. When we save it, it prettifies it. And all this is saying is I would like a sans serif font, please. Don't worry about all the different options. Trebuchet MS is preferred in Internet Explorer. Lucida is also an Internet Explorer. Some of these things, work in some browsers, not others. Okay, now go to your browser and tell me if it made a change. Is it any better yet? Come on, I need some feedback.
No.
Hell no! That's wrong, the boss says. Well, even though you made a CSS file, the darn thing doesn't load itself. So let's go load it. To load it, we have to go back to app.js. And you're welcome to copy and paste this, but you could also do this. Import ./app.css. You don't even have to assign it to a name or anything. Now go look at your app. What happened? Isn't that lovely? We got rid of all those squirrely curly Q font things, the serifs. So we've made progress. We can tell the boss that we now know how to put CSS into React. You just import it. Okay. I can see that you're underwhelmed. There's another way to do this. The boss doesn't like the way home.js looks. He wants a little bit fancy border around the title. But this time, we're going to do something called an inline style. To do that, please go to Meetup. We're in home.js. Go to Meetup and copy step 11. Copy step 11, not the part that says style equals on the bottom, just the constant. And I'll show you where to paste that. Paste that above home. So we can make an object in the world of React. And we're going to call this div style. And the object can have any number of fields. Each of those fields is then mapped to a CSS statement. Now what's cool about this is React is smart enough to know that if you're doing a margin and you put a 40, which is an integer, behind the scenes, what do you think it turns it into? 40 pixels. You don't have to do this, the quote 40px quote. You just do a 40. If you have something that requires quotes, by all means put them. And Some things, normally border radius is border dash radius, and there's a bunch of things that they have changed so that they have camel case so that you can get to the styles that way. Of course, a dash isn't legal in a object field name. Make sense? Now, how do you think we're going to get that to work? Oops. Where did the N come from? What are you doing to me here? Okay, and it even has that nice IntelliSense. So again, you could copy that phrase from Meetup, or you could just put it in there. So what I'm saying is I want the wrapper around the title Philadelphia Eagles to be styled with div style. Go ahead and save that and go over to your browser and call up the home screen. And voila, we now have, ooh, rounded corners. Boss loves rounded corners. We could put a shadow. Do you want to do a drop-down shadow, or? Well, then look it up. It's an easy thing to do. It's one line on CSS, but all right. All right, so is everybody just awfully excited that we can do an inline style? Good. We're making progress. Okay, now, what's the last thing that the boss really thinks is awful? You keep that to yourself. You may get hurt here. Yeah, the menu stuff. They're awful. Nobody makes menus with little dots in front of them anymore. That's old school. Let's fix that. How would we fix it? Well, I'm going to do this backwards just to teach you a lesson. We go to header because that's where the darn buttons are, right? So, what do we need to import here? Okay, and save it. I'm sorry, my mistake. I wanted a // same directory. Okay, now, it allows me to do that. However, if I go back to my browser, watch what happens. Ooh. Apparently, you shouldn't try and import files that don't exist. Not a good idea. So, how are we going to fix it? Go back to Component, click New File, and it's going to be called header.css. Save that file. It doesn't have to have anything in it. Save it, then refresh your browser, and lo and behold, it's perfectly happy to load an empty file, as long as the file exists. Now, if you want to see some cool stuff, go over to Meetup and copy the meticulously detailed set of CSS I did and put that into your code. And I know what you're thinking. What are all those greater than signs? Well, that's just CSS 2 and 3. That's just the way it works. They're called selectors. So that says, I only want you to change an LI that has a UL above it and a nav above the UL. And what I want you to do is I want you to give it a background color. I'm going to do some padding. I'm going to make the cursor a pointer. I'm going to give an outline a 0. I'm going to do an inline block. Who knows what that does? And then the A tags, I'm going to set them so they don't have the little underlines, text decoration 0. So go ahead and save that and refresh, and we now have a application we can be proud of. Okay? So again, it's very common to make buttons out of LIs. And out of the box, React takes a button and a link becomes an A tag. So you just have to know how to style them. And go ahead and move your mouse across those and you will see that they have the requisite pointer. There is one, to me, there's a bug. If I click on roster, it works. If I click on the right-hand side of home, it doesn't work. You have to actually click on the word home. Yeah, again, there are ways to fix all this in CSS. Just not tonight. Yes, same idea. But, you know, if you're not sure what to do with this stuff, go find your CSS person in your shop and they'll look at this and laugh at you a little bit and they'll have it done in like 2 minutes. Okay, so you're almost proud of what you built. You've learned how to do styles that cover the whole app, inline styles, and also a page-specific style. Okay, now, we're going to get to finish up my portion of the night. I'm going to do something a little fancier. Okay, so how many have followed along to this point? So it's still, oh, that's good. So some of you caught up. Excellent. Okay, good. All right, so last thing we're going to do, I'm not happy with this schedule because, you know, somebody hard-coded the schedule. I don't even know who the kickers and the evergreens are. And I'm very concerned because this looks and smells to me like soccer, and soccer is not real football. We're talking football. We're talking a sport where the head of the NFL makes $50 million a year. Of course, we all know that the guys that run Soccer Federation, they stole much more than that. Chris, you have a question for the studio audience.
Well, they're asking it here. The question was, can you show again where header CSS was included?
Okay, my mistake? Yes. So you always do that with an import statement. Technically, we could have imported, we could have said like import styles from header.css. Then everything inside of styles would be attached to the object called styles. And you could reference them in your code that way. We're not doing that. We're just, attaching the whole thing. So, but yes, you just import your CSS. By the way, if you really get into React, there are fancy libraries you can download that manage styles much more effectively than this. Somebody that's doing a really big application and lots of pages would probably want to invest in that kind of technology. All right, so here is my request for you. I want this to be the schedule for the Eagles, not this hard-coded schedule. But I don't want you to hard code everything. We're going to make this work from an API. To understand that, let's go look at fullroster.js. Full roster actually imports something called the player API. It gets all the players and then it maps. Map is essentially a for loop. So it goes around to each player, it grabs their number, and then it puts their number into a link statement. And finally, it shows their P name. So how does that actually look to the user? Well, if you go to roster, what you'll see is you have the P name there. And you can click on it, and each of those actually go to that individual's record. And then you can click the back button and go back to where you were. Pretty useful. Well, let's do something similar to schedule, and this will show you how to tie in an API. So to do that, we use the absolute most powerful thing in any programmer's tool chest. Copy and paste, okay? And here's how you do it. So The API is at the top level, and that's what it looks like. We need something just like that. So what do? We right-click it. I'm sorry, not right-click. We go to up at the top where it says Files, click New File, and let's make one called Schedule API.js. Okay, and Schedule API, we want that to be almost identical to Players, but it's going to bring in the schedule data. Some big Polish guy went and did that for you. So let's go get that. That's under, you're welcome. That's under number 14. And this code will copy pretty reliably. And you have to go all the way down, not the whole rest of the page, but you have to go all the way down until it's done showing all the games. And you have to include the export default schedule API. So we're copying all that stuff and we're putting, we're putting that into our API. And when we save that, it's going to format it a little bit. And you'll see that we now have a class essentially called Schedule API. And inside it has a thing called games, and these are all the games with the proper scores. And also in there, there's a simple call, a function called all that returns all the games. Pretty simple stuff. How would we make that work inside of the schedule? Well, let's think about copy and paste. We know that we've done this in full roster, right? So full roster, it does the following. It imports player API. So take and copy that line and go down to schedule and add it in schedule. But what's the difference? We want to change this to schedule API from schedule API. Okay, now, this part here isn't going to work because just like in full roster, what we want to do is replace that with a loop. So you can go to roster, copy that, and paste it into schedule in place of the LIs. Now you will get some warnings because there's no such thing as player API, but there is a schedule API, which I can cut and paste. It's going to call all and bring back all the schedule items. Now, in my examples, just because I'm nitpicky, P stands for player. I could put S for schedule, but I'm going to put G for game. So there is a game. I can't remember if there's a number, and I don't want a link. In fact, all I want for the time being is the opponent. So my question is, can I just print the opponents down the page? And to check my work, I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at my schedule API just to confirm. Darn it. I need a real mouse. My schedule API, it does not have a number, it has a game. and it has an opponent, and it has a date. Okay? So I'm going to go back to schedule.js, and I'm going to change this to g.game and g.opponent. If we did everything correctly, we should be able to go to our browser and go to schedule, and you will see that it has all of our opponents in the order that we played them. So again, stuff in React gets very repetitive, like it does in most coding languages. And if you have a pattern that works, like we saw on roster, just copy that and make it work for the other component. Okay, to finish, and I can see we're getting, well, I'm actually, it's past 7 o'clock, so I'm going to finish this quickly. You're welcome to try and follow along, but I'm going to do two things. I'm going to change the HTML, and I'm going to add some CSS to make this look fancy. And to do that, I have the answer already in Meetup. So I am going to change the HTML first. That's number 17. And I will tell you that because Meetup is so annoying to me, editing code, let's see. So I want to replace this. Oops. That was bad. I got rid of the UL by mistake. What's that?
Control Z.
That's one way to solve it. Now remember, I told you earlier I had to like change the less thans just to get it to appear. Let's see. And then I think I have to close my UL. Darn it. Did I miss something? Let's look at this. So what it's doing is you start a brace, and that's where I want to put custom code, and I'm going to map all the schedule things, and I'm going to print them, and I'm going to print the game, the date, the opponent, the result, and the score. Oh, these divs. Oh, oh, darn it. That was, that's a Meetup thing. That's my, thank you. Ha! Well done. Okay. So, to get the idea, we're going through a loop and we're making a bunch of divs for each game. Let's take a look at what this looks like in the page. And it doesn't look like much, does it? Well, it works. I mean, the boss is not going to be happy. He doesn't understand why I have those little dots. But, you know, we're okay. So, to finish this, two big steps. To finish this, we have to go back to schedule, and we have to make a style sheet. So, I'm going to do this quickly because I know Rob is going to start. So, we'll do this. Okay. So we're going to do a schedule.css, and of course it gets upset because it doesn't exist. And I say, I promise to make one. So I go over to components, I make a new file, call it schedule.css. And if I, yep. You wonder why I don't get anything done. Schedule.css, right click, oops. Right click, rename. Schedule. Okay, Well, there you go. Now, as long as the file exists, the page should load, but it doesn't style it. This is where things get exciting. Are you ready to be excited? We will actually learn something about CSS. Woohoo! So what I want you to do, I have all the CSS up here in the meetup. Let's do one at a time. First thing we're going to do is we're going to say UL's list style type none. And if we put that into our CSS and we save it, and incidentally, when you do this, it doesn't automatically redraw the screen. So you had to refresh the screen. Did anything useful happen? Got rid of the silly dots. Got it. Okay, next thing. We go back, and let's take all the LIs, and when we have the LIs, let's make everything green because we're eagles, and we're going to do something called display flex. Now, everybody, of course, follows all of my advice, and you've gone and studied flex in detail, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. Is that correct? You should do that. Really useful. So what did I do? I told all the things to go straight across on the same line. That's pretty simple. Not very useful, and yes, I made it eagles green. Woohoo. Next step. Let's take all the divs inside the LIs, LI greater than div, and let's give them a flex of 0050px. Any idea what that does? Do not shrink, do not grow, exactly 50px basis, it's called. What's going to happen? We almost have columns. Why doesn't this work completely? Because 50 isn't wide enough to fit the darn Seahawks and Cardinals. So it folds off our layout. So I will show you another cool CSS trick. That is the next one. Did you know that you can override a single column by calling it out by number? So column 2, and no, it doesn't start at 0, it starts at 1. These are CSS people, they don't understand base 0. Okay, so what this does is it says, I want just the second column to be wider than the rest. Lee still doesn't think this is going to work. Aha, it did. So since I made that column wider, everything lines up perfectly, the boss is almost happy. Okay. And the last thing I'll show you in schedule.js, I have something called a conditional class. So what I did here is I said class name, and does anybody know why you have to say class name in React? Class is a reserved word in JavaScript. That is correct, sir. Okay, so what I got going on here is I'm going to say, let's look at the result. If the result is a W, in other words, a win, then I don't need a class. But if it's not a win, let's make the style loss. What does loss do? Well, this is really complicated. Loss changes the color to red. I know this is complicated, but okay, so you add that down here, you save it, you rerun it, and we're done. Okay, so what it's doing as you loop for each one, you can conditionally look at the data and make a decision which display you want. Well, if you want, I can change the code so the by comes. What do you want? Blue? You want black?
Purple.
Ay, ay, ay. All right. So, is everybody ready to go home and add React to their resume? And you're also going to add React routing to your resume and CSS3. because you did it hands-on. This could be worth a lot of money to you someday. Any questions? All right. So using this tool, I could, if I were so inclined, I could share this, and when I share it, I can embed it into my blog, and you can actually go to the code and work on the code right in the middle of my blog. It's pretty cool. If I actually took the time to write a blog, I would use this. You can also send it to people. It has an editor URL, so you can see what mine did. Then, if you're so declined, you can fork this, you can put it on GitHub, and you can download it. And this is the really useful thing. If you download this, it will create a template that you can then use in Visual Studio Code to basically bring up the entire application you just built and grow it. That's the real benefit from this. All right. Drop the mic. Your turn. Ow. Absolutely. Yes. We'll still. That's an interesting question. If we remove the RSVP, will they get the emails we send? I tried to send an email to Sarah with instructions. Right. Yeah. That's an interesting question. You need to learn more about. You need to learn more about meetup. Perhaps there's a way that we can ask a question when people
Yes.
register. You can, because you use that for your group.
Yes, when they RSVP, you can ask us.
Okay, so what we might do in the future is they can RSVP, and we could RSVP like several hundred. But we would ask them, are you going to attend in person? And then we would count that many towards the room allocation and the refreshments. So it's worth thinking about. All right, I'll let Rob take over.
Disconnect for a second. Something disconnect for a second. Sometimes that happens. You ever notice it? This is React unit testing. I disconnected, so hang on. I know I did.
We are momentarily disconnected as Rob reconnects his machine.
What do you wait?
So we're all set? Good? All right. Unit testing. All right. How many people do unit testing now with whatever software they're running? Well, that's a few. Have you ever done JavaScript unit testing? Yes? A few of you? Some of you? Well, React unit testing, this is what I think about React unit testing. And it's basically, it looks like this. Because there are so many different moving parts, and you have to get them all right. And if you don't, it really looks like this. Because, Trust me, I spent a lot of time trying to get all the right versions of everything together, and it's a pain. And I'm going to tell you right up front, it's not easy. So enough of the humor here. So did everybody download and do everything they were supposed to do when we sent out the instructions for what they were supposed to do as far as creating? I didn't do anything. Did everybody download all the stuff they were supposed to download? Get everything set up. Okay, good. So basically what I wanted you to do was to create the same base app that we used last month. Inside that, there is some testing stuff. So we're going to look at that first, and then we're going to go on to some other stuff to look at other testing. So there shouldn't be too much in the way of code for you guys. If you just want to follow along and look through your application. And there are some things you can type in, but it's not very much. Now I use Visual Studio Code, and I also open up the terminal window at the bottom because that comes in handy as far as I'm concerned. It makes it really useful to use this. So what we want to do first is we want to just look at this application, and we've seen it all before. And you see the app.js, that's what's up here right now. That's the main application for this, or the main component for this application. And if you notice, what they gave you was this other thing called app.test.js. So if we look at that, this is an actual unit test. Now it doesn't do very much, and what most people would call this is more of a smoke test than a unit test, because all it's really doing is trying to render the app component, and if it does, it succeeds, and if it doesn't, it fails. That's all it's going to do. So what you can see here is this is how you start the test. It renders without crashing. That's what they gave you. That's all it does. Okay. So let's take a look a little deeper here. So has anybody heard of Jasmine before? Okay. Has everybody heard of Jest before? Anybody not heard of Jest? Okay. Jest sits basically on top of Jasmine for React testing. And Jest is what Facebook recommends you use when you're doing React testing. So basically, if we look through the node modules, so if we go up here to the node modules, and by the way, before we get started, let's do one more thing just to make sure everything is all correct. You should probably run an Npm Install just to make sure you have all the components in place. And this might take a while. There it goes. Okay. So that just makes sure you have all the right components in place. So you should do that. And while this is doing this, we'll just go over here real quick and look at package.json. So there's this test script in here, and that's what we're going to be running when we do run the test. So when this finally does get done loading, we'll see that. And also, while this is going on, I'll look over here in the node modules. And what I'm going to look for is something called Jest. So if you come down, it's all alphabetical. Find the J's, Rob. There it is. Okay. So there is the testing suite that gets loaded in. So that's what it's using. It's using Jest. If you're really interested in this stuff, what you can do is you can go in, when you open this up, you can go into the package.json for Jest, and it'll tell you what version it is and some other things about it, where you can find it, that kind of stuff. There's lots of stuff here. Now, remember when I was talking about that Jenga stuff? Yeah, see all these different runtimes, and there's Istanbul, and there's a bunch of other stuff sitting out here. All this stuff has to be the right versions, or you start getting errors. And the errors are not easy to find or figure out what's going on. All right, so I'm done all my install. And there's other pieces. Bill mentioned Babel. What Babel does is it takes the JSX and turns it into JavaScript. Just plain old JavaScript. Yes. Yes, I sent out the instructions. Is there a something that would? Is there a start point for this? And yes, if we look at the lab instructions, that's where I got it from. For those who can see that. So yeah, you got Node.js, npm. Basically, you want to run create React app and then give it a name. If you signed up, you should have gotten it. If you signed up for the meetup, you should have gotten this email. How many people got this email? Looks like most people got this email. Okay. All right. Did I answer the question? Yeah, good enough? Good. Glad to hear it. All right. So, notice I said we had that script in there for running test. You type in npm test, and what happens is it will run the test eventually. So what they did with this version of the testing application is when you run test, it stays in the test mode. So it's constantly watching. Now, here's something I like to do when I'm playing with this stuff is if you turn on, and I'm not going to explain how to do it, but inside Visual Studio Code, you can turn on automatic saving of your code. So if you make a change, it'll automatically rerun the test. So if I go in and change something in here, and I don't really have to change much, let's say, that's what I was going to do. Yes, welcome to Awesome React. Okay, I can put in awesome. If I spell it right, it would be better, wouldn't it? So if you look down at the bottom, because I have automatic saving turned on, it just keeps rerunning those tests, which is pretty cool.
I like that.
You like that? I like the automatic save in Visual Studio Code when I'm doing this stuff. It makes it cool. All right, so there's other things you can do here. If I type a W, oops, wrong place, but that's okay. There's a time on how long it takes before it saves it. It's a very short time. So I type W down here in my testing. There's some other things I can do. So I can apply a filter. So if I want to say, you know, I only want things that have, I don't know, index in it. Well, what's going to happen is I don't think I have any tests for index. So it's going to say I can't find anything for index. But if I put in a pattern of app, which we know we have, then it's going to run the test based on app. Just that one test, right? So, did I lose it? Okay, so so basically, there's all these little things you can do in here to make the test run. So everybody able to run a test, make a change, do some things to it. Okay, good. All right. So now comes the time when you're going to have to not look at that one, but you can look at that one, but it's no big deal. All right, so I created, I took Facebook's examples and I put them up and I played with them and I put them up inside of a GitHub repository. So if you go to this GitHub repository, which is my GitHub repository, and yes, you can use any browser you want. I'll use this one for right now. Oh my God, come on. There is no internet connection. I lost my internet connection. Well, that's not good. Okay. All right, so what I want to work with first is a snaplot project. So if you want to go there and just get the zip file for it and download it. You can clone it if you want to. It doesn't bother me one way or the other. But if you come in here, you should be able to get a zip file, download a zip. And put that someplace on your system. It's really confusing with both mics. I think I should turn that up. All right, so did everybody get a chance to get that? Shouldn't be too big. Yes? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to open this up with the Visual Studio Code, just like the other stuff. So you can, if you've got it in your right-click menu, you can use it that way. You can open up a command prompt and go to the directory and type code space period. However, whatever makes you happy for opening up code with the sample. Let's just close some of these things here. All right, so let's take a quick look at this project. So what you'll notice is that we have a couple of components. One's called clock.react and that's called link.react. This doesn't really do anything as far as running it as an actual React application, but we have a few things in there. And what you should notice is that there isn't any, you can see the clock.react.js, but you don't see a clock.react.test.js, right? That's not there, and there's no link.react.js. So the recommended way, even though the example project puts it that way with a .test.js at the end, what Facebook and people who work with Jest would prefer is that you put everything in this test folder. I've heard that described a couple different ways. It's a double underline, and people call it a dunder. I don't know. It seems odd to me, but okay. So anyway, your tests go in there. So if we open that up, we can see that there are two tests in here. One's called clock.react.test.js. The other one's called link.react.test.js. So those are where the .test.js files are inside this test folder. So let's take a look at the link.react.js, not the test, but the actual link.react.js. So what this does is this sets up a link. It's similar to what was Bill was showing with that was part of the React DOM, routing DOM, I guess. This one basically sets up a link, and what you pass into it is what the page is that you want to go to, and you can pass in some text and you can have some on mouse enter and on mouse exit code added as well. So it's pretty simple, little basic component. And then we have our link.react.test file, and what this does is this is just setting up a bunch of tests to call that React component a bunch of times. And you can see that you've got this this it, and then renders correctly, and it renders as anchor and stuff like that. And then the other thing you see in this, which is what most people who deal with testing are used to seeing, is something that is like an expect. And that's what this is here, this expect tree.toMatch snapshot. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, when we're doing snapshot testing, does anybody know what snapshot? Right.
Snapchat?
snapshot testing is? All right, so this is basically you're taking a picture, well, picture in quotes, of your site when it gets rendered, and you're saving it off. And then later on, when you make changes, if you rerun the test, it compares what you currently have to what was in that picture. And it sees if anything is different. So this is, the interesting thing about this part is, how many people do TDD, test-driven development? Okay, this is not test-driven development. Okay? What you do is you develop everything first, you make sure it works, and then you create the snapshot. So it's the opposite of test-driven development. So what this does when it runs is it creates these snapshots. So that's what's up here is these little snapshots. So if we look at one of these things, let's take a look at the link react.test.snapshot, and you'll see it is an English version of what your page would look like if it was rendered. Right? So it's got the anchor tags, it's got different stuff in here. And you say, well, where did this come from? Well, it came from running the test the first time. So we'll do that in a second. But before we do that, I want to point out, but wait, there's more. Inside the package.json file. Remember before we had that, if you remember what that looked like before for the scripts, for the test, it had a little bit different stuff here. This uses just plain jest to run. Okay. So you still do npm test, but in this case it's just going to run the jest command one time and that's it. So let's do something crazy, and we'll take this snapshot folder and we'll just delete it. Yes, I'm sure when I move it to the recycle bin. Okay, it's gone. So, first time we run it, what we want to do is we want to run our npm test. And what you'll see is it'll go through and it'll run all the tests that we have, which should be 2 of them. And I get an error because I didn't do npm install. Because I always forget to do that. Now, if everything works the way it's supposed to, I should get another error when this is done. Fun stuff. Okay. Oh my God. Well, I've totally screwed it up now, haven't I? Pardon me? Yeah, I might have to do that. Well, we'll find out, won't we? Oops. That's not going to work. Well, this is taking longer. That's a good sign. All right, so while we're here, let's look at the clock.react.test file as well. All this is doing is saying I'm going to set a date, just fake a date out, and I'm going to call and render that date. So every time I run it, I should get it should look the same way every time I run this. almost done. Any questions? No? No, it's fine. Just jest. There's a jest right there. But I was trying to break this earlier, and apparently I did a good job of it. So, good thing. I have succeeded. Yes, thank you. How's that network coming along there, Rich? This does take a while. Come on. Now you know why we asked you to do all this, a lot of this stuff before we got here, right? Because this can take a while. No, that was me. So, testing, React. So let's talk about Jest while this is still doing this. So what does Jest get you over Jasmine? So Jasmine is basically the testing. Jest gives you mocking capability, right? So you can say, and depending on how you have things set up, you can set up Jest so that it mocks everything. So when you ask for, you know, the different components, instead of having to try and deal with things that may, like if you have a component that calls multiple components down the line, you may not want to have to test every single thing all the way down. So what it does is it gives you a mock or a dummy version of your component that you can use, so that you don't have to worry about having things that are broken some other place break your test, even if your test is correct. So that's basically what Jest gives you is a complete mocking framework. And there's a couple different commands you can use inside your testing to say I either want to mock a component or I don't want to mock a component. So have we been sitting at this one for a while now?
Yep.
That's what Jest gets you. There's some. If you go to Facebook's pages on Jest, they have a lot of examples. Not all their examples work as is. You have to tweak them a little bit here and there, because what happens is as different components get updated, they don't go back and update their examples very well. So what you have to do is you have to sort of make them work after you get them. And this is one of those ones I had to tweak a little bit to get to work. Am I still on the network? All right. How many of these do I have? I have another one over here. Take a look at this one. Maybe this one doesn't work. Yay, look at that. All right, so I had to switch to a different one. That's okay. So what's this telling me? I have 2 tests. So it says test suites 2 passed. Tests 5. So of those 2 test suites, there are 5 tests, and there are 7 snapshot examples that passed. So let me just go back over here again and try this again and delete this snapshot folder. And rerun my tests. And what you'll see this time is slightly different text, because what it did was it actually recreated the snapshots. Because it said, hey, there's no snapshots here for this stuff, so I'm going to recreate them and put them out there. So what good is it? Well, let's say you have somebody who fat-fingered some things, and they came in, let's say, inside the link. What we say is, hey, if you don't send in a page, then use a hashtag for my link, right? So what happens if I accidentally, got rid of that? Okay. And then ran the test again. So now I've got errors. But not only do I have errors, it tells me what the problem is. It basically is telling me, if I make this a little bit bigger, see, it says, hey, you had this this thing up here, and it had href equals that hashtag, and now it's href equals undefined. So that's not right. Something got screwed up, right? So now I can go in and say, all right, fine, what happened? Then I can go and figure out what went wrong and fix it. But, and I could just put that back in and it would fix it fine. But what happens if I said, well, this is what I want it to do now. So I had the snapshot and I've changed my mind, and now I want it to look like this. What do I have to do? Do I have to get rid of the snapshots and recreate them, or what? Well, you got a couple options here. One is you can go into the snapshots by hand and say, every place that I've got that href equals hashtag, I can replace that with an undefined, and it would work fine. It doesn't care. It's just a text file as far as it's concerned. So it goes through and it reads it, and it's fine. But if I fix this in one spot, there's another spot that also has it, and I don't know how many there are. So it might be easier for me to update the snapshot rather than just go in here by hand and modify it. And you can do that with the test command. So what you can do is you can say npm, not up there, Facebook, yes. I can say npm test, and then you got to give it a parameter. The parameter is u, but I can't just put a u in here with -u. -u won't work at this point. I can put -u, but it won't do anything. It'll get confused. What you have to do is sort of say, hey, I'm going to put a parameter in, and it's -u. So you have to put the 2 dashes first, and then you do a -u, and then it works. And then if I hit the enter key now, what it should do is it should say, hey, there it goes. So, 2 snapshots updated in 1 test suite. Yes. Yes, it does. That's what the problem is. Yes, you are correct. That's what it does. Yes. Yes, it thinks it's for npm's parameters. Yes. So anyway, so there it is. Now it updated and you can see up here, right up here, it updated my snapshot to say href equals undefined. So now if I run the test again, it should pass, because that's what I'm expecting it to do. Oops, I didn't want to do an update, but it's okay. So that's pretty cool. And you can do the same thing over here. If I want to make it look like the other test failed, all I do is just change a little something in here and just rerun the tests. And it'll give me an error for that one. But you know, running these tests like this by hand all the time, it gets a little boring. Wouldn't it be nice if it did the same thing the other one did? Well, there's a way to do that too, because Jess has a watch command. So I put in Npm Test and put in dash dash and then space dash watch. It should run the tests and say, hey, you screwed up. Oh, because it needs to be a dash dash watch, not a dash watch. Sorry. My bad. Because I used the whole word. See. And I screwed it up again. Anyway, that does work. I've had this problem before, and it just sort of craps out, and I haven't been able to figure out what the issue is with that. But it does work if you do a dash dash watch. And then the other thing you can do once you're doing that is while it's running, you can do the same thing I was showing before, where you can make changes to the file and it automatically runs every time it sees a change. And if I want to do an update, one of the commands is a U, where it will just go out and update the snapshot directly. So, it has something to do with promises, and I haven't figured out what exactly the problem is, but there it is. Okay. So, that's that. So any questions about snapshots? They're thrilling. How much time we got? All right. So if you're feeling brave, there is another project out there that you can grab. So go back to the GitHub, and there's one called Module Mock, and you can get that one and download that one. Where am I? And just get the zip file, unzip it, stick it someplace, and then open it up in code so you can take a look at it. And this again uses that same style of putting the tests in the test folder. So this is a really, really simple little component called fruit. And it just exports some constant apple and a constant strawberry and a default banana. So nothing too much to this, but let's take a look at the tests that go with it. So this is what I was talking about before, is mock, or is test jest being a mocking framework for your tests. And what you can see in here is I'm telling it that I want to mock the fruit component, because that's what we want to do. So when we do that, when it runs the test, this default export is actually trying to get back to the original one, and this one, you know, comes back as apple because that's what we mocked it to be, apple. And this is again trying to get back to the original one. So that's why they're coming up with nulls, because that's what we've done up here. Actually, it's up here that we've done that default stuff. So if we run this, what will happen is it'll say everything passed because it's doing exactly what I expect it to do. Because I'm mocking this fruit and not really using fruit.js over here. Okay. If we look at the mock per test, you can see we're doing similar stuff. So in this case, we're doing a do mock on fruit, and then we take the mocked version. And here we have don't mock fruit. So this one's taking the actual fruit from over here, the fruit.js, and using that one in place. So you can see you can use mocks or not mocks in the same test suite. So this thing is a test suite because we've got multiple tests inside of it. So that's why it's a test suite. And partial mock, you can see what that does. It's pretty much the same thing. We're mocking fruit up here, and in this case, we're saying to have. Oh, that got quiet. We're saying that in this example, we want to make sure that we call the right thing: default export or mocked fruit, and or default results. So the different results come back, and depending on how we've made the call, we either are calling the actual one or the mocked one. So, it's you can go through these. You can run them if you want to. I'll run them just so you can see. And I give up. So, again, jest is not recognized. I don't know why it does that. But that's why I've been running into these problems a lot. Basically, sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And what I've found with React unit testing is I spend a lot of time trying to figure out why it's not running when it should be. Not that the tests aren't correct, but that React, the jest itself, is not working the way it's supposed to. So anyway, we're pretty much out of time. So that's that. You can go out and get those examples and try them out for yourself if you want to. They should work pretty good. Now, one thing I did notice with the snap shot, which I think is this one, and it's still not done. I'm going to leave anyway. The React test render, this one says, use the latest version. That won't work. What I found was I had to switch it to this version to make it actually work. Now, why? Don't know, but
when they switch to React 16,
yes, and that's what this is. So this is using React 15, but I think Jest is using the most recent version of Jest, and that's where it's getting confused with the React test renderer piece. So that took a little bit of time to try and track that down, because the error you get makes absolutely no sense. Something about the get current user doesn't exist. I'm not using get current user. I don't know what you're talking about. So there you go. All the errors. It was for testing, so I had to have errors in it. So there you go. That's why we test, right? So there you go.
All right. This was fun. We have to figure out. I'm still baffled why 100 people signed up and only 30. this afternoon, it was down to like 125. But out of the 125, 30 came here.
Right.
And 22 came online. So it's just not what we're used to. If you remember when we were doing the Angular labs about, that was like 8 or 9 months ago, we were getting 90 people in the room each time. You couldn't even get a chair.
Nice place now.
This is a nicer space, yes. It has electric power, the screens are better, Rich is in a better mood. I mean, everything is improved.
Just a little.
No, we were comparing the next 9 months ago.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a new haircut.
I think so. It's the old haircut. More often than I do it.
He uses 150 grit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sand it smooth a little bit. All right, thanks for coming. We have a monthly meeting in 2 weeks, and if not, we'll have another lab in 4 weeks. Tell your friends.
This works.
We'll go find some.
This is
Yes, I can see that. All right, well, I got some